Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Deets with Dr. A. Jason Ampel, aka Dr. A, here with you with another episode. I'm getting a little echo here. Hold on before I jump on. You hear that, Matt? Jason Ampel, aka Dr. A, here. All right, let's fix that. Let me try to fix that real quick, ladies and gentlemen. I want to keep talking with that. You hear that, Matt? All right, let's fix that. Let me try to fix that real quick, ladies. There we go. All right. Well, let's start over again. Welcome to another episode of Deets with Dr. A. Dr. A here, Jason Ampel. Thank you for giving us time here on another Monday evening. So we've got another amazing episode for you here tonight. If you guys catch last week's episode, we had a group of principals on from one of the school districts here in Central Florida talking about all types of different types of interview questions, the do's and don'ts. So we got a lot of great feedback, a lot of emails, messages about how awesome that was. So what we did is we pre-planned, and we have two of these sessions. So tonight we're having another session with another group of principals here tonight, which we'll bring on here in a minute. So here at the Learning Liaisons, we specialize in providing test prep for educators like you to pass all your certification exams. We started here in Florida. Now we work across the United States providing test prep for the practice exams, and we're going to be focusing on other states here very soon before the end of this school year. So real exciting stuff. So what we want to do is provide these sessions online for our current teachers and aspiring teachers in our College of Education across the country, give you guys some of the tips, tools, and strategies that you deserve so you can move on to the next phase of your career. So tonight's focus is interviewing. So if you are afraid about the interviewing process, go ahead and give me a comment, yes, in the comment box. So we're going to have a lot of people watching here live. If you're watching the recording later on, you could still answer our questions and give our comments too. But a lot of people, including myself back in the day, struggle with the interview. We have a lot of anxiety. So we're going to focus in on getting you what you need to understand and be excellent at answering questions. And more importantly, the do's and don'ts. So we're going to go through a lot of practical interview questions that you most likely going to encounter when you sit across the table from an administrator or a panel of an administrator. So without further ado, let's bring on our guests here tonight. So Matt, we're going to throw up our guests here. All right. So welcome. We have Dr. Monica Gordon, Dr. Langley, and Dr. Hardrick. And I'm going to let them take the floor and introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their journey in education, what they do now, what they did before, and why they want to become a teacher. So let's start with Monica.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this evening of this edition of the Learning Liaisons, where we're going to talk about some interviewing tips. I am Dr. Monica Gordon, principal of Lake Jim Elementary right here in Orange County, Florida. I have been in education for about 21 years as a middle school teacher and an administrator, both at the elementary and middle school levels. I've been in Orange County, I've been in Lake County, I've been at the middle school and the elementary levels. I love what I do. I get to work with a lot of Title I turnaround schools, and these are the schools that have traditionally students that need that additional support with respect to their academics. We have a great time here at Lake Jim. I want to just say to you that I was one of those who was alternatively certified. I didn't go to a school of education. I found my way to my love, which is education and helping kids and families. And so 21 years later, I'm here to tell you that everybody has their first interview and everybody will be nervous, but here's a story for you right here. We can all do well, and we're here to help you because we want to make sure we have great educators following behind us and continuing our work as we close out this school year. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. David Hardrick, so he can introduce himself.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. David Hardrick. I am the principal, or the proud principal, of the magnificent Meadowbrook Middle School in Orange County, Florida. I've been in education for 21 years, and at Meadowbrook Middle School, we exude excellence because we exceed every expectation with excellence. I got into education as an education major, but I always tell people my path was a God path, not a chosen path that I chose, but that God chose. If anyone knows, growing up in a traditionally African-American family home, when mama says you only have 4 years to get out of college, you only have 4 years to get out of college. So I changed my major about 5 times. And of course, she said, you can change your major many times you want, but I'm only paying for 4 years. And so literally education was what I was able to do in my last year and a half and graduate with a degree so I could show my mom that I had a degree. And so because God led me there, I ended up being very successful in it and just went on that path towards being a principal, not with a direct path of this is what I want to do, but just taking it one day at a time. And if you do that, just take it one day at a time. It will work for you. Don't try to speed track it. Just do what you need to do, learn as you go, and you'll have success in the educational realm.
Awesome. Great.
And so I'm going to talk to Dr. Langley.
Oh, we got her muted. Hold on.
There we are. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with everyone tonight. I am Dr. Tammy Langley, and I have been in education for 23 years. It has been my pleasure to serve in the capacity of a teacher, a coach, an assistant principal, and a principal. My journey started in Citrus County, then led me to Seminole County, and now I am currently in Lake County as the proud principal of Fruitland Park Elementary School. I too love what I'm doing because it's an opportunity to help not only the students, but also the families and the people within the community. So the journey has been a wonderful one. And I don't know of anything else that I'd rather be doing than what I am doing. So if you're on this path, you are on the right path if you're looking for purpose.
Great words there. Thank you to everyone for joining us. You definitely have to have passion for what you're doing, or else you're in the wrong profession, because we know we're not educators for the money, right? So what we're going to do here is I've got a small set of questions, kind of like warm-up questions about preparing for an interview. Then we're going to switch gears and get to more specific example questions that most teachers are most likely going to encounter sitting across the table from a principal or a panel of administrators. So we'll start off easy. And a lot of these questions, some of these questions you guys provided, and then I also have some additional ones from other school leaders as well. So these are a lot of the popular questions I get often, and I'm sure you get these questions too. What are some things I should do to prepare for an interview ahead of time? So I know there's a lot of different things that you can throw at for our aspiring teachers here, but what are some big ticket items for each of you guys?
For me, it's knowing the school. So whatever school that you are going to an interview for, you put your application in for, you need to know the school. You need to know the school's data. You need to know the school's population. You need to know the vision and the mission of the school. And when I say know it, doesn't mean know it verbatim, by heart, but actually know what the school is all about. What is the culture of the school? What is the academic presence of the school within the community? As much as you can know about the school, I think the better off you'll be when going into the interview.
And where can a aspiring teacher or someone before they come in, where can they find that information?
They can find that information if you're in Florida from the Florida Department of Education, all sorts of data on that website, and also from the school's website, and also within the district. The district has information on each school as well.
Yeah, so whether you guys are watching this live or the recording, it doesn't matter if you're in Florida, Alaska, California, Nevada, doesn't matter where you're at. It's all the same thing. Go to your DOE. You could find this information, and that great thing called Google the school, find out information about that, because that's definitely a popular response that a lot of people say. So awesome. What about you guys? What else can you add to that?
I would think to prepare for an interview, also knowing the school is important, but also knowing yourself, your why, your purpose. What is it that you want to bring to the table to help that school to become successful? If you are passionate about helping kids to graduate high school and get on into college, then you definitely may not want to consider applying for that elementary position. You want to do something a little bit closer to your personal passion and your why. So know the school and know thyself, because those two things combined will make you a great fit for any learning organization.
Awesome.
And one thing I would add is, because again, we had from our pre-discussion, I'm an applications person. So knowing the school is one thing, but what I look for is, when you prepare, is that you know the school, yes, you know the data, yes, but what sets you apart from other candidates, that you got next steps. So, because we're going to our next school year, so what expertise do you have to apply the next steps to help us get where we want to get? Because you know our goal, you know our vision, you know where we are, so you kind of know where we want to go. So what are those next steps? How would you respond to that data, and what expertise do you bring? And if you haven't taught before, what learning did you do in school, projects and field experience that you have that you could bring to the table to help us work those next steps to respond to that data?
And it's great you mentioned that. We talked about before we started about a lot of people come in an interview when they maybe necessarily wasn't a teacher before, doesn't have that classroom experience. So be prepared to be able to apply maybe some skills in some of your other job or different career, and get ready to answer questions, how that applies to the classroom also. All right, great answers. So next one is definitely a popular one. I've done several trainings through UCF for interns, and I can't tell you how many times people argue with me about what they can wear and what can't wear. So we got the experts here. So how should a prospective teacher dress for an interview?
I would say dress to impress. You are here trying to persuade us that you are the best person, the best fit to set in front of a group of children to become a role model for not only those great things we're looking for with respect to behavior or becoming good citizens, but also just someone that they can strive to be. So we want to put people in front of students that can look the part, speak the part, and also emulate that for our little ones because they look up to us. So how you come to an interview is very important. I would say nothing less than business casual. I would say business professional dress, because education is a profession in which we work hard. We have multiple degrees, and it may not be the best or highest paid career field. However, we are a career field of professionals, and professionalism is expected. When you're here, you're not only representing the school, you're also representing the children whenever you have that school name attached to you. So set the tone. That first impression makes all the difference, because that first impression will carry over into your classroom as well. And you're going to want your children to look up to you and to respect your professionalism, just like your family. So I've got to know that you've got that coming in the door, and that's not something I need to coach or mold.
So if you're a teacher, if you're someone going in an interview, and let's say you're in a southern state, the southern part of the United States where it's typically warm around the year, whether it's Florida, Alabama, Georgia, wherever, Arizona. Do you think that coming in with like a polo shirt is acceptable if it's like 95 degrees outside? Or are we still guys wearing, long sleeve shirt, jacket, tie, and girls wearing, women wearing I don't know what women wear, but their fancy dress up.
Ladies, we want you in that nice blouse, the slacks, or the skirt. Gentlemen, we would love to see you in that nice professional dress shirt with the collar, a nice tie, slacks, belt, shoes. We're not looking for Crocs or flip-flops or any of those types of things that you may want to put on after the interview. We're looking for you to truly show that professionalism. This is a professional career, and we want professionalism. So I would ask, if you walked into a doctor's office or your dentist's office and they had on flip-flops and a polo and a little tank top, would you still want them to perform that procedure on
my doctor?
Well, Jason, I'm not saying that, all doctors can't, that first impression means everything. I'll let Dr. Hardrick speak to the gentleman. I don't want to speak to the gentleman too much. Dr. Hardrick is known to be a trendsetter in his professional dress.
So I was going to say, Jason, I've heard many people say, well, I'm going to be the PE teacher, so I dress like a PE teacher is going to dress. However, like Dr. Gordon said, we want to make sure that you can also be a role model for our kids. So you may not always be in gym shorts and a t-shirt. You need to show them what you need to look like in order to make that first impression. Because I don't care how much we try to say people don't, or we try not to, we're human. And because we're human, we do make judgment calls when we see people. When first impressions happen, we remember them. When last impressions happen, we remember them. So, fellas, I would encourage you to dress up. You don't have to come in with a Brooks Brothers suit on. However, you do need to come where we can see that you can be a role model for our kids, because that's a major part of being an educator. Is you're not only giving them academics, but you're giving them life skills as well. And that is an important life skill, is how I present myself, how I come into a room, and what's that first impression I leave on people. And just a tip that I give, like to be a professional shopper and dress people, is people start at the shoes. So if you ever watched the movie The Devil Wears Prada, every scene starts at the shoe and works up. So in our society, as a communications major as well, we do make an impression from the floor up. So people look at your shoes first.
Wow. How about you, Dr. Langley? Anything to add to?
That's awesome advice, right? I never knew that we started at the shoes first, because if you saw my shoes, what I'm wearing to work right about now, It's for comfort, I tell you that. But I agree wholeheartedly with everything that has been said. To simplify, for me, it's honor the profession, right? So often we look at education and people who are in the profession of educating students, educating children, as something that's less than. And so the way we dress actually honors the profession. So if we want to be looked at and taken seriously about what we're doing as professionals, then we need to dress the part.
Yeah, and we just started, and I already heard that like 3 or 4 times. Dress the part, dress for your profession, and that's the key there. Something that we kind of came up last week's episode with other principals about when this is on the same topic of dressing up. What about tattoos? I know a lot of college students and ask questions and things along those lines about going to interviews if they have tattoos in their arm or anything like that. Is that something that gives a certain perception from a school leader across the table, or schools have to have them cover stuff? What would you tell somebody? Because I see a lot of people in teacher groups and college groups have that concern, and they ask that question about, I have tattoos, should I cover them up for an interview?
So I don't mind jumping in on that one. I always encourage people to cover their tattoos, and I tell people, make sure your tattoos can be covered. So if you get it on your hand, you can't always wear gloves. So if you're going to have tattoos, you make sure that long sleeve shirt can still cover it, the long pants can still cover it. As you get into the profession, and we have like our field days out in the sun in May, March, and April, then you're going to have on your athletic clothes, and we may see them, but that's more of an appropriate time that they may be seen. But then if it's going to be seen, it has to be something that's appropriate, because kids are going to ask questions, and then you're going to have that conversation with that child, and you want to make sure that's a conversation that you can have with the child based on what they see, because kids have eyes. They're very honest and pure, and they're going to ask you about what they see.
Mm-hmm. Good points.
I personally I'm okay with someone having tattoos. One of my, somebody on my administrative team now has tattoos. He has tattoos on his arm. I think what Dr. Hardrick said was first impressions are very important. And sometimes having tattoos can give a negative first impression depending on what it is or where it is or the appropriateness of it. But the kids actually ask him about his tattoos. So it's actually some of those things that help him to kind of relate and bond to them later. Sometimes they'll ask and point about this or that. But don't forget, I'm at an elementary school. So sometimes they'll ask. So tattoos are a very personal decision and personal choice. But with anything and everything, you also have to look at the environment in which you're trying to work in and to become a part of. So it may be good to cover up tattoos for that initial first impression, but it's not something that I feel like you should be ashamed of and or hide, if that makes sense. Okay.
I know it's a concern with some people because they feel like might get a certain first impression if someone sees them with tattoos on their arms, even though, there's nothing wrong with that person. I want to get your take on that. Here's another popular question. What if I don't know the answer to the question that's asked? We're going to get into some specific practice questions here in a couple of minutes. But what would you say to an aspiring teacher or someone going to an interview if they don't know the answer to the question? Maybe they ask them something technical about a lesson plan or a theory or something like that, and they just don't have an answer to it.
For me, I'd rather that the candidate is honest. Ask clarifying questions, because maybe something that sometimes it's not necessarily that you don't know. Sometimes it's just how the question is being asked. And so you may need to ask clarifying questions so that you can understand what is being asked. And once those clarifying questions from the candidate to the interviewer is asked, it's possible that the answer can be simulated through that conversation. But always be honest. I personally would prefer you to tell me, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to learn, or something to that effect, rather than trying to answer something that is way off base.
No, you don't tell people just to make it up?
No.
No, I've had some, I'm sorry, Dr. Langley, I was just saying, I've had some who have said, this is not something that I know, this is an area where I would need coaching, or I would be open to coaching and support. I would say that would be the best. That's what I would be looking for in that moment, because obviously if it's something that I'm looking for And if that's not a skill that you have at the current time, and I'm really interested in you, then I need to know that you're coachable and that's something that I can teach you over time to help with your lessons or with your job.
Awesome. All right. So we kind of talked about this before we went on air because I thought this was interesting. This came up last week's session. Do you amend your questions based on a candidate's resume? Meaning, if you have someone coming in an interview and they have no teaching experience and maybe they were in a different profession versus someone who has been a teacher before, do you tailor your questions towards those individuals?
I have. If I see that, and it could be someone who has experience in the profession and someone who doesn't, or just someone who may have experience in a business setting. And we were talking about this prior to us coming on, and someone doesn't. For example, if I have an experienced teacher, I may ask that teacher, how do you utilize, or how have you utilized student data to drive your instruction or to drive your instructional practice? Whereas if it's someone new, I may ask them, how do you plan on monitoring, or how do you envisioning monitoring your students' progress so that you can make data-driven decisions? So I want to understand data, how they would utilize the data, but one should have experience already doing it. One should have a conceptual framework for how they would use it. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes into that theory versus application aspect that Dr. Hardrick was talking about earlier.
Awesome.
And if they're completely not from the education setting, then by looking at the resume, and I know that in advance, I will go ahead and give them permission to apply it to where they've come from. So if they've done trainings, I tell them, how did you plan for the training versus how would you plan a lesson? Because a training is really a lesson, but they just may not see it that way. So they may not have a standard, but you have an objective for that training. So what was the objective? How did you develop the training to meet the objective? And how did you monitor and so forth? So just have them apply it from whatever experience they do have so we can see how they could translate it to education.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback because I know a lot of people that we work with and people in alternative certification with our courses, they always ask that question. You know, they're scared about it because they don't have the teaching experience, but they have all this other experience. So am I going to be able to apply that? So I appreciate your feedback. So I have one more warm-up question before we get into the real interview questions. Is do you Google teachers prior to their interview?
Yes.
That's my surprise question. I didn't put that on the list I gave you.
So that's a good question. So actually I do trainings on that. It's called your electronic footprint. And I'll tell people that 95% of professional hiring agents, and that's principals, we fit into that realm. They research your electronic footprint. So not just Google, but your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your Facebook, and so forth, because all those things are linked together. And you want to make sure that they are appropriate. Also, you want to make sure that your top 5 friends are appropriate, because when people go to your page, your top 5 are always there. And so they're going to see those along with your picture. And so again, first impressions are everything. And once you see it, you can't forget it. And so people will associate you with birds of a feather flock together.
So what do you say to an aspiring educator or teacher that says, that's my LinkedIn, my Facebook, all that, Twitter, that's my personal life. What does that have to do with my ability to get a job with you? What would your response be to someone that says that?
So our code of ethics in the state of Florida, and I'm pretty sure every other state may have a code of ethics for teachers, it doesn't talk about your moral standing in the community and so forth. So we are role models. Most of us will spend more time with kids than parents get to spend with their kids if they're working parents and so forth. And so we help shape who they are holistically, not just who they are academically. And we always want to make sure we're helping them become productive citizens and let them make their own choices and not be influenced by who we are necessarily for how they should go in their everyday life, but give them the framework that will let them operate. And so we want to make sure we're always doing that. So we do look, because that's just part of our society now. That's how interviewing goes. So you just want to make sure that your electronic footprint and the electronic footprint of your top 5 is what you want someone to see you as and how you want to be represented.
Awesome. You guys have any feedback on that as well?
I would 100% echo Dr. Hardrick. I'm sorry, Dr. Langley. No, we should use our signals. No, I 100% echo what Dr. Hardrick just said. There are times in which I have had phone calls from parents concerned about postings of what one of the teachers, the faculty of staff members have put out on social media, or an image that they displayed. And what you do in your personal life is truly your personal life. But at the point in which you put it out there for all to see, it's not necessarily your personal life. You've made it a collective social. Mm-hmm. So you're inviting opinion. And the Code of Ethics for the state of Florida, and I'm sure, like he said, other states, does state that we have to be in a certain moral standing with respect to what we do as educators. So live your life, but at the same time, also understand that people have, because of your position, people will have opinions about how you're living your life because you influence their children on a day-to-day basis. And just like you may have that, that the certain people you don't want your kids to hang around because you know they do this. There's also some families who, well, I see this person does that. I don't want that person influencing my child. Mm-hmm. Because for us to have relationships and to make education successful, we can't just talk about the reading or the math. We have to get to know them as people, as little human beings, and they get to know us too. So our parents are sometimes concerned about what we do in our off hours. So it's not necessarily fair, but it is applicable. Dr. Langley?
This is a very good question, and the conversation is very rich, and I'm not going to add too much because I think both of you have covered it beautifully. But you said, Dr. Gordon, that you get calls about what people have posted. I have even gotten calls about bumper stickers on the cars of teachers. So it's not just the posting on, the social media sites, but it's simply how we present ourselves within the community, period. Everybody's watching. Once you become an educator, all eyes are on you, even eyes that you don't even know are watching. And so as principals, we do get those calls. Your teacher was, and so we do have to be very cognizant of what we're presenting in public, because what we present in public becomes available for others to judge.
Yeah, I didn't even realize this. I don't do it, but I realized this over the last year because some of the teachers I work with for the certification, that I'll connect with a lot of them on social media from our courses and our Facebook groups. And there have been some teachers that'll message me about their courses or their account that they have with me. And I'll go look up their name on Facebook and they're not there. And I go, well, I can't find you. They make accounts with different names.
They do.
And I didn't even think about that. Like they'll have their middle name as their first name or whatever, just to keep that separation. Not that they're doing anything illegal or bad. They just don't want to cross that bridge and do anything. So I just want to get your feedback, because I know that I'm sure there's some school leaders that don't do that, but I'm sure a lot of them do now. And I think it's very important. So I appreciate you guys for being candid with that response there. So let's turn the focus to more realistic questions that you will get sitting across the table. So here's a great first one that you guys provided. Who was your most memorable teacher from your time as a student, and what makes this teacher stand out to you most? So how should we or should we not answer this question? And maybe one of you guys want to give your examples.
So when people get that question, they have to be careful. I mean, we want you to be honest, we want you to be who you are. But when you get that example, it should tend to be a positive example. Sometimes people get into the story and realize the story about why they remember that person is not always positive. And so now you've left a negative tone in the room, and you don't want to do that.
One thing I can say about this question, and to echo and to piggyback off of Dr. Hardrick, is if your most memorable teacher was someone who created a negative experience for you in that school, and you want to share that, it's okay. But you need to take that and extend it to and how that has shaped your perception or how you're going to go forward with your role as a teacher to make sure other students don't have that experience. You can extend it that way. So if you're going to share the negative story, don't just leave it there. Don't put a period behind it. Put this is what happened to me, but this is how it shaped me from here forward and how I'm going to help my kids.
Yeah, I know several people that became a teacher because of having bad teachers when they were younger and they wanted to do things the right way. So that's one of the reasons why they went into the profession. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So next question is, why did you become a teacher? Kind of similar theme there.
Don't say because I'm waiting to get the other job that I really want, or I couldn't get the other job, so I guess I'll teach. That's not the right answer.
What do you guys think there? I don't want to cut anybody off.
So, go ahead, Doctor.
I was going to say, I had one of the principals last week that made the comment, which I thought was interesting, that don't go in with this question. Don't go in an interview and say, well, I was furloughed, so now I want to kind of get a job in the middle. That obviously that's not something that's traditional, but definitely don't do that now if you're just looking for a holding spot.
Right. I think the common response that I get to this question is because I love kids. Although that is wonderful that you love kids, but I'm looking for the impact that you want to provide to the students that you teach. I'm looking for something beyond just the verbiage of I love kids. I love them, yes, but what is it that you want to do for them? Where is it that you want to take them in your thought process? I'm looking for your energy as it relates to impact, as it relates to innovation, as it relates to taking these kids to the next level, rather than simply because I love kids.
And two things I've gotten from this question more than once, is because I want to change lives. Okay, just like Dr. Langley said, yeah, I love kids. Okay, but I want to change lives. That's great. But how are you going to change them? Why do you want to change them? What direction are you trying to put them on? So that's one that kind of people think that simple sentence is going to just answer that entire question and wow us. But that's the generic answer. But how are you going to change your lives? And another one that I get that I'm not surprised by anymore is because I need to get my student loans paid off. So although that is true, there are many avenues in the educational realm where they can help you get your student loans paid off. Let's not let that be the only reason why or the primary reason why we went into education.
Not I want summers off or my insurance paid for. No, that doesn't work. All right. All right, next up. Tell me what qualities you believe are essential to being a good teacher. Of those qualities, which is the most important and why? What do you guys think about this question? How should you respond, not respond, maybe give your response if you're the teacher?
In these type of questions, I'm looking for if the potential teacher has, or the candidate has a good understanding of that there are academic qualities with respect to delivering strong instruction that I'm looking for, as well as the social, emotional, and the relationship piece qualities with the kiddos. So you could be a phenomenal science teacher, but if you can't connect with those kids, those lessons are going to fall on deaf ears because they don't like you. I mean, honestly. And then you could be the greatest teacher and all the kids love you, and you can't teach the standard worth a lick. And then they love you, but they're not learning. So there has to be a balance between those two. So when I am listening for this question, I'm looking to see, is it one dimensional or is it multi-dimensional with respect to the answer?
Okay, awesome.
I'm looking to see very similar to what Dr. Gordon said. I'm looking for character, and I'm also looking for competence. In the character aspect, I'm looking to see and to hear whether or not an individual can build those healthy relationships with students that actually give students an opportunity to learn from that individual, very similar to what she said. And also competence. What is it that you know as it relates to the teaching profession, the pedagogy that you're actually going to display in the classroom for students?
Anything to add, Dr. Hardrick?
So this is where people laugh at Dr. Gordon and I, because she was like, what is he about to say? Because she's the gifted thinker, and so I am I call myself the simple thinker. So I look for just that basic instinct, multidimensional, all the good stuff that both of them said, but can you be that parent that holds on to the no? Because many times kids play emotions, and then what happens is you become what we call the schizophrenic teacher, because it's just on Monday, it's no on Tuesday, it's just on Wednesday, it's no on Thursday, but it's maybe on Friday. And so if you can't toe that line of I love you, but I have to love you sometimes with the no, then what happens is the classroom management gets off and then the behaviors take over and then you cannot get to the instruction. And so I'm looking for a person that can teach, yes, you're intelligent, you're competent and so forth, but for our kids, especially in the elementary realm or especially in some of our low socioeconomic economic schools, they need that strong figure, that strong dad or that strong mom figure that can teach them with love, but also with the discipline they need for the structures they need to be successful. So for my setting, many times being in the schools that have our most fragile kids, we have to make sure we have those people that can carry that line.
Awesome. And I heard a buzzword. I think Dr. Gordon, you mentioned it. That's definitely one of those buzzwords in schools now the last couple of years, and obviously is very important. Social emotional learning. Is that something that principals are going to use in a question, and that candidates should be aware of what that means and how it's applicable to the classroom?
Yes.
Yes, 100% for sure. Yes. Social emotional learning is that learning beyond the academic content. If you look at the whole child, and we have students that because of what's going on with our recent, COVID or corona situation with the virus, who have been out of school for months. And some of them have still not made it back to a campus yet, even though they're participating and learning online. These children have lost something. They've lost a sense of normalcy for some of them. Some of them have family members who have lost jobs or careers or homes, or worst case scenario, they've lost their lives. And so we have our kids who are experiencing certain levels of trauma and certain levels of change. And so we have to be very cognizant of what does that child need? What is that child currently going through, so that we can be mindful of those things, help to provide those things, and then also add, the learning of the reading or the math or the science on top of that. And I'll let my colleagues jump in on that as well.
So, and that goes back to that parent piece. Parents, whether they know it or not, they're always doing social emotional care with their kids. And so we have to be in tune to the emotional needs of our kids. And so parents do that all the time. You're always in tune to your kids. And so because you have to develop relationships with your kids. So although we're making social emotional learning more prevalent and we're talking about it more, it's always been something we needed to do. We just may not have had to do it as much as far as making sure people know how to do it and have the skills to do it. But that's, again, what we're looking for in those qualities. Can I make that relationship with kids? Can I understand their emotions? Can I be culturally sensitive to make the adjustments necessary based on what kids are going through?
And I think that would be the same that would apply to parents too, right? Communicating with parents as well, because that kind of brings to the next question, which as teachers, we all know part of the job is communicating with parents. So a potential question could be, what are your thoughts on parental involvement? What relationship we want to establish with our parents and students? So how should a prospective teacher answer this question?
Well, I think it's important to, I'm sorry, Dr. Langley, go right ahead.
No, go right ahead, Dr.
You want me to mute Dr. Gordon? I could just mute her. You want me to just mute her?
I did pause.
I'm kidding.
I did pause. I just didn't want to have dead air.
Gordon.
Dr. Langley, go ahead.
Turn that side of your brain off. What part of the brain is that, Dr. Gordon?
Impulse control?
Yes, the limbic system.
It's okay. So for me, when I ask questions in regards to parental involvement, I'm looking for how the teacher is going to engage the parents into becoming a teammate with them in order to educate the whole child. And we've been talking about the whole child tonight. So we can't do what we do without the parents being involved in some way. But I'm also listening for that compassion piece, and that's just me, that compassion piece with the teacher that can understand. It goes back kind of to the social emotional, what we were talking about before, that can understand that you may have little Jerry's mom that can be there every day and can come into the classroom, but little Penny's mom may not be able to come to the classroom, but there are some other ways that you can actually engage them, because we want to move from involvement to engagement. Involvement is just me telling you what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, whereas engagement is me collaborating with you, and together we're making a plan in order to better the student. So I'm looking for those connections. How are you going to engage parents in their child's learning, in their child's building them socially, and emotionally? That's what I'm listening for, and that you can actually be diverse in whatever it is that you do. That is not just one-sided.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to share on that one?
Yeah, I think Dr. Langley summed it all up for me. I agree with, wholeheartedly with what she said.
I couldn't have said it better.
So back at the beginning, I asked you the question about how should a teacher candidate respond if they don't know the answer to a question. So here's a good example of that. Tell me about the most significant professional article, a book you read in the last year, right? Well, I know we all have time to read articles and books. Maybe you do. I don't. What would you say to someone if a principal asked them that question? Is this something that you would ask as well, potentially?
Dr. Gordon would.
You know what? My social emotional needs right now, I would say, honestly, I don't think I have ever asked that of a potential teacher. I may ask that of a coach or a potential administrative, someone coming onto my admin team, because I'm looking to see that they're broadening their knowledge base at all times so that they can apply that, because you can only lead people as far as you've gone. So we have to continually help ourselves to grow. But if this was asked of a teacher, not in a Dr. Gordon interview, but perhaps a Hardrick interview, if this was asked of a teacher, I would be honest and let them know that at this point, I may not have had a significant book or article that I have read in the past year. However, I am open to learning about this. And if you have one that you can suggest, whether I join your team or I don't, I would be happy to take a part. And, I would be happy to look at that or, to partake in it. Now, me, honestly, I read, books are behind me. I read and I do articles all the time. That's just a part of me and what I like to do as far as growing. But if you don't do that, you have to look at, you only hit a certain point with your learning. If you don't continue to stay abreast of current trends and research and professional articles, then at some point, what we're doing is going to overtake what you know, and you're going to become somewhat obsolete in your skill set.
Awesome. All right. So here's a very popular question that I get is, what can you bring to our school that makes you unique? So what are some ways that a potential candidate can answer this question?
So these types of questions, when they're asking about them as a person, I always tell people be true to who you are. And the reason why is this: we get hired for what we write on the resume because that got us the interview. Then the second part of getting hired is what we said in the interview. But typically people end up bumping heads or getting released from positions because of who you are. You need to be you from day one. So that way you're going into a setting where you, as being you, is going to match up. It's going to be a great compliment. So don't try to make up things that the person on the other side of the table wants to hear, because sometimes you will end up putting yourself in a position to keep up something that that's not really who you are. And because we're human, eventually our true selves will come out. So for these types of questions, be true to who you are and just really say what you could bring to the school in your own uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
I would say drawing your life's experiences and how you can connect some of those things to some of your lessons and what makes them more relatable. I mean, we have all experienced similar things in our lives, but we've never experienced the exact same thing in the exact same way. So you are your best asset that you bring to the table. And Dr. Hardrick said it perfectly. Just be you. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that authentic you, because it will read true to our kids.
Awesome.
And I agree with both of you, and I actually wrote down present yourself, and don't come with the philosophical jargon that you think everybody wants to hear, because in actuality that turns us off. And while you're doing all of that, you're thinking about, what am I going to cook tonight?
I'll probably pick your philosophical jargon apart and ask you a whole bunch of questions about it. So.
Right. I was about to say, Dr. Gordon will be going, oh, they're talking my love language. And so that you
so
again, you just walk down a path of an expectation you can't fulfill because
right.
Say what theorist is behind that. Right? What's the theorist that's behind that philosophy? So let's get to more application type questions. So describe 2 important curricular topics you have taught in this grade or subject area. So obviously this is primarily to people who have experience in the classroom. So how should we attack this question?
So one thing is, and I'm a very big supporter of people bringing a notepad to an interview, or if there's one there to use it. This is one of those questions where you actually need to put 1 and 2 on your notepad and put that 1 word for each topic so that you answer both. Many times these types of questions, people don't make it through because they don't finish the whole question. So whether you talk about math and science or social studies and cooking, whatever you want to talk about, just make sure you actually fulfill the question because you want to make sure that people can see that you can listen and that you can deliver on what's being asked of you.
So you mentioned bring a notebook. So you definitely looking for that when someone comes in with a notepad to write things down?
Yes, that to me, that's a standard, that's a norm, because that means you're taking your experience serious and you want to actually let people know what you know. So I tell people all the time, don't feel rushed. If you want us to ask the question again, we'll ask it again. That's not a problem. You want to take 5 seconds and write your little notes down, that's fine, because I tell people when you get the job, you're going to have a teacher edition, or you're going to have a PowerPoint, or you're going to have a lesson plan. You're going to have resources to help you implement your job. So why not let you use those resources in your interview?
Great point. I like that. I never thought about the whole notebook thing. That's a good, thank you for sharing that. You guys have any feedback?
I would add on to that, for example, I'm in an elementary school. And so let's say I'm hiring you for a 3rd grade position or 4th grade position. And you say you've had experience teaching, tested grade levels in elementary. Then I would ask you as the teacher, what are the 2 most important, topics that you've taught with respect to 3rd grade ELA or 4th grade ELA? And I would be looking for someone who maybe has had experience or understands the importance of informational text versus the literary text, or a particular math concept. Because if you have that experience, then you have an idea of where your kids may struggle within the curriculum. And that helps me to understand as a teacher, as you've prepared your lessons, do you understand what are the most key important standards or concepts within that course? Mm-hmm. And how you can possibly prepare for them. I've also had teachers to bring a sample lesson plan of a lesson that they taught prior, and they've reviewed it with me. And I asked them, how did you construct the lesson, or why did you put the lesson together in this way? So those are ways. Sometimes when you get the interview, an administrator may ask you to bring with you any artifacts or evidences that you would like to share, respective to your experience, even if it's from your internship. And so seeing lessons that you've already developed is something that you've delivered, or the data that came from that lesson can be a great talking point, and it could really hit home with a question like this.
That's awesome. Now you're saying that, I think best practice, just everyone watching the recording or watching live, is even if they don't ask you for something, why don't you bring it?
Bring it.
Bring a folder. Obviously, don't bring a whole big box of stuff, but bring a folder with stuff. There you go. Bring a folder with some lesson plans, examples of projects you've done. I think based on your response, I think someone look at that and go, wow, this person really is serious about this job. Awesome. All right. So this is kind of along the same lines. Tell me about a lesson you taught and why it went well.
For me, with this question, what I will be looking for is the learning that took place. So I'm not listening for how the show went, if you will, but I'm looking for how did it impact students? How were students' knowledge? How was it enhanced? How did it increase? How did it improve? So went well to me is that it transferred from the instructional practice to the learning. That's what went well means to me. Went well does not mean, man, I got up there and I did this and I did that and I did, and I was on point and I had this and my power and all this was pretty and all that. That's not well to me. Went well to me means students learned something. And if they didn't catch it right when you initially taught it, went well also means from that informatively, I was able to assess that this student needs this, this, and this, and now I can go and make plans in order to review, or in order to reteach, or in order to have a small group, whatever the case may be. So I'm listening for the learning that took place as a result of the instructional practices that were implemented.
Awesome. Dr. Gordon, anything to share on that?
We have 4 questions that we use to drive all of our planning. The 4 questions are, and these are the 4 questions that I would tell everybody to write down and think about how you would respond to. And Dr. Hardrick can piggyback off of this because it comes from a common work that we're doing with learning by doing, professional learning communities. And so the first question is, what do you want them to know? What's the standard? What's that skill? What do we do when they get it? What do we do? What are we going to do if they don't get it? What's the other question, Hardrick?
And what do we do if they already know?
And what do they do if they already know it? So as you're planning for your lessons, you have to think about talking about the lesson that went well. If it went well, did they already know it? And you kind of wasted some time on something that they already got, and we could have extended the learning versus hitting that basic application again. Was this a reteach of something that they didn't do well the first time, and now they've got it? Because you may want to extend upon that, the first time I taught it, a certain percentage of my class didn't necessarily grasp the concept. So I came back, I reflected, I used their data, and I developed a reteach lesson. I retaught it, and now it went very well. So those kind of 4 questions will drive your instructional process and practice as you go. And those are things that you always want to think about as you're preparing for your lessons. Anything else, Dr. Hardrick, you want to add to that? Because we're doing similar work.
No, you summed that up really good. Matter of fact, we have those 4 questions posted in every common planning room to make sure we're always looking at those, because we want every lesson to go well. And like Dr. Langley said, well means there was a transfer of learning. The students got something.
Do you think a variation of this question, which could be a potential interview question, is talking about a lesson that maybe didn't go well and what you did to change that?
Yes,
Absolutely.
All right. So let's see here. Let's turn the page a little bit to classroom procedures and classroom management. Describe a classroom management plan that I've used and why it worked. Now, before you answer this, do you think this is something that could be asked to someone new coming into the field about classroom management and procedures, or is this something primarily for somebody who has experience in the classroom?
If they have experience, then they will better answer this. If they were a traditional education major, then they would have been exposed to some of this, so they may not have taught, or they may have did a field experience, and they would know it. And typically when people are transitioning to education, and I know they may not have the answer for this, I'll flip it and say they were a manager, then ask them about their management practices to establish a cohesive environment or a welcome environment, but that has discipline and structures and so forth.
Okay, awesome. So how should a teacher answer this question?
So typically what I see is either teachers nail this one and they're good to go, or they'll talk in theory about a management program. So my 2 counterparts made that same smile. Okay. They'll talk about a management program that they've heard about, but they don't understand, and then they get caught up. And so it's easier to say that you don't have a management plan, or have not been exposed to one, and let people know that you are willing to work with what the school has in place for school-wide, so that you can learn about it and so forth. Because when you say CHAMPS, because everybody hears about CHAMPS, but they don't know that CHAMPS is an acronym, and then you say, okay, well, tell me about that. What do you do for your C? Because you said CHAMPS, I'm thinking C stands for conversation, and you can't answer that question. It's not like so just let people know that you don't know of a program, or if you do, just go ahead and tell us and get on through the question.
All right. Anyone else have any other comments on that?
Breathe.
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 And I would add to that to know actually what classroom management is. Because
Yes.
I know from teaching at UCF a lot, because I literally taught a class on classroom management, that there's some people, not everybody, but some people have a misconception that it's primarily about how to deal with behavior, but it's the procedures and protocols you
Right.
to eliminate that potential behavior. So knowing the difference and what that actually means, I would add to the conversation, is very important for someone walking into an interview. You guys mentioned before that buzzword social emotional learning. Here's another one that's definitely one of those buzzwords as well. Describe an approach that you've used to differentiate the instruction for students. So how should a teacher attack this if someone gave them this question?
I would be looking for a database response myself personally, that you understand your students' data and understand where they need, what they need with respect to where they currently are on a particular skill or lesson. You could also look at it from the approach of, does that student have any additional services or supports if they're ESC 504 or ESOL? So it could be from that perspective, or it could be a data perspective.
I think I will be listening for a teacher who is actually taking time to get to know the kids. That means know their skill sets, know their levels, because they need to know what differentiation of instruction is. That it's not just having a small group in the back of the classroom, because we can differentiate through task, we can differentiate through assessment, we can differentiate through instructional practices. So there's so many different ways differentiation is administered in the room. So I'm looking for a teacher to tell me how they would get to know the kids and know what needs to be differentiated in order then to put a plan in place. And that can change, right? Day to day, standard to standard, lesson to lesson, that can change. But it's all about knowing where the students are in your room so that you know what kind of differentiation needs to happen.
And that's definitely another pro. You're giving amazing answers to all these questions, but there's some of these big things that are just popping out, like these pro tips to crush your interview. The fact that going into an interview and when they ask you a question about this, just like Dr. Langley, just like you said, being able to respond by saying there are multiple ways to differentiate. I don't know about you, but if someone's sitting across the table from you and use that language, you go, whoa, oh, well, how? And they start spitting out different ways to do it. That's definitely a great way to crush your interview that way. Awesome. All right. So here's another one. While the lesson is ongoing, how can you tell if students are getting the material? What do you think, Dr. Hardrick? Sorry.
That's okay. So these are the questions where I want to make sure people understand the difference in compliance and actually learning. So if kids are sitting quietly, that doesn't mean learning is taking place. Just because kids may respond to you doesn't mean learning is taking place, but actually listening to the responses and making sure the questions that we ask kids are aligned to the standard. Kids can answer questions all day long, but they haven't learned that standard if the questions that you're asking aren't aligned to the standard. You want to make sure that's what's happening to make sure that they're getting it. So those checks for understanding are important to make sure that kids are getting along the way and not waiting until the end of the 45-minute lesson to actually check to see if they got it, but checking along the way to make sure that kids are picking up, because you may need to enact on the spot and then change some things up so that they can continue to follow the lesson.
And on that topic of checking to see if kids understand, is it typical for a school leader in an interview to ask a candidate about different types of assessment? I mean, is that something that you're going to ask them about in the classroom?
One of the questions I do ask to make sure they understand the difference between summative assessments and formative assessments and checks for understanding, like in that monitoring piece, because you have to know the difference to make sure you're actually targeting what you want the kids to learn and that you're also monitoring if they're picking up the right stuff along the way, because they all have different uses.
Okay. What do you think, Dr. Langley? Anything to share on that?
I agree. What I had jotted down is formative assessments and those types of things as it relates to how can I tell if they're getting it. And also another thing that I would say is looking for students to actually ask questions as well, because if the student is actually engaged in learning, they're going to have some of those moments where they need to ask clarifying questions in order to know if they're understanding. So not just the teacher asking the clarifying questions or the teacher asking those questions to check for understanding, but the students checking in on their thinking and on their learning. And I'm also listening for what is it, if I'm giving time for collaboration or cooperative structures, I'm listening for what is the conversation between the students as I'm going around, and I'm using that guided practice to see if the learning is transferring.
Right.
I think to kind of sum up what both of you were saying was, we talk here at our school about how do we make learning visible.
Yeah.
Teaching is visible. If teaching happens outside of the head, it's what's happening in the room. It's what I can see and observe that teacher doing. But learning is something that happens inside the brain, inside the head, and it's not visible unless you create intentional opportunities to make learning visible. And we talk about reading, writing, thinking, and speaking, and how we have to provide opportunities for processing of thinking of things that we may have read, how we can incorporate writing into what we're doing, because the writing is a physical manifestation of the thought process, just like speaking is as well. So if we have writing and speaking opportunities through collaboration or them processing some type of task, which is what Dr. Hardrick was talking about, which could be possibly some type of formative check, then we can understand what type of learning is taking place in the classroom.
Right, and I like what both of you all said, and what Dr. Gordon said about making it visible. What I tell the teachers is the person doing the most talking is doing the most learning. So if the kids never talk, then we don't know what they know. And like she said, the learning's in their head. Well, I can't look in your head, but I can hear what you say. And so that lets me know that the learning is taking place. So just make sure it's not all teacher talk. So the person doing the most talking is doing the most learning. So when kids take over the conversation and they ask questions, they clarify, now they're learning and not just the teacher.
Awesome. So next, this is one of the questions you guys provided me for discussion here. How have you worked with a teaching team? So first off, let's clarify for a lot of our college students who are watching this live or recording, what is a teaching team first?
A teaching team could be your grade level team or your department. If you're like in a middle or high school, you may have an ELA department or a sixth grade department. Mm-hmm. A teaching team could also be a cohort within your school. It could be your mentor-mentee cohort. So there's different versions of what a teaching team could be. I think the whole point of that question is to talk about collaboration and what that collaboration looks like, and how, if you're on a team, what are you working towards? Is there a common goal that can translate to a student output later on? Because whatever it is we're doing collectively as a team should be helping us grow as teachers within our practice, and then translate to student learning. So that question can cover multiple areas.
Dr. Jason, there was a question in the chat that went with our last question. Is it okay to?
Oh yeah, I missed that one. There you go. Thanks, Matt.
So for that particular question, that's that whole group monitoring piece. So there are whole group monitoring strategies that allow you to know what all kids are learning or doing. So the part is not just the question or asking each child a question. The part is, what is each child doing back when you ask the question? So you want to make sure that you ask those whole group questions, but how do you monitor each child? They can all write on a whiteboard, and then you say 1, 2, 3, they hold up the whiteboard. You can give them A, B, C, D letters on their desk, and they can hold up the right letter. I agree, I disagree, hold up stickers. So that way you can see each child's thinking because they're responding to you. That way you can see every child, and I have to ask every child an individual question.
There's also digital tools that you can use as well for responses, that if you could pose a question out there, the children can put their response in, and you can instantly see which answer choices your children selected. So there's a lot of different ways that you can collectively monitor your kiddos. And then what you want to do, that next step is not just to monitor them, but then take what's your next step with respect to if they got it right or if they didn't get it correct. How do you then change and make changes in the moment or on the spot to help those kids who may not be getting it correct? And if you've got a whole group misconception of the skill, then in that moment, we have to go back and address the whole group teaching of that skill. And perhaps there was something that was missed with how we introduced that topic to the kiddos. So there are multiple ways that you can monitor, both with physical things in the classroom or digital tools, digital response tools.
Great question, Tundra. Thank you for posing that question for our school leaders. This question, I think, this is an amazing question. I grateful you guys submitted this one. A lot of people think, well, I'm not a reading or writing teacher, but we all know that we all are. I don't care what grade level you are, right? So how would you integrate reading and writing into your subject area? So that's definitely, if someone's coming into a job position and they're not technically an English teacher or elementary school teacher, maybe they don't focus on reading that much. Well, what would you tell a teacher how to answer this question?
So I tell my teachers even now, because some of my teachers will say, well, I teach science. Well, all of us are reading teachers. So that's like one of our new mantras at our school. And I say, everybody stand up, repeat after me, I'm a reading teacher. And so they all stand up and say, I'm a reading teacher. What I encourage my teachers to do, science and math, go collaborate with your ELA teachers and with your reading teachers so you can begin to understand those strategies, because we should always be reading and writing across all curriculum areas. And so if you don't know all the reading strategies when you're in the interview, but still be open to be able to say, I understand, I'm going to use reading strategies in science. I'm going to use writing strategies in science. And just let the principal let us know that you understand that it's something you should be supporting, even though you may not have the strategies. But if you do know them, then go ahead and let us know that you already know how to incorporate reading and writing into whatever subject area that you have.
Agreed. And to answer this question, I am looking for reading and writing in every single subject area. I think Dr. Gordon had talked earlier before about reading, talking, thinking, writing, and that should be seen in everything that that is done in the classroom. And there are various strategies that can be used to accomplish this. So I'm listening for basically just a candidate to answer that I am to incorporate the reading and the writing. This is was said before. I'm going to incorporate it into my math or the science, whatever it is that is being taught. It can be done.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Interactive notebooks are a great way to incorporate reading and writing into any subject area. If you can have them pre-write as a part of their bell ringer, you can have them write as a part of their exit ticket, as they're reflective and they're being metacognitive and they're talking about what they know, what they don't know, or how this particular topic connects with something personal for them. And then you can add that social emotional element to there. So I think it's important that you have the reading and the writing embedded in all content areas. It's this, and you have to understand that the science test is a reading test, that the math test is a reading test because there are word problems on there. So they have to be able to do those things. And sometimes they don't want just a numerical answer. They want an explanation of how it was solved. Mm-hmm. And so they have to be able to do that in order to demonstrate some of those math skills or those science concepts. So it's vitally important that you do that. Put the reading and writing across all content.
Great stuff here. Yeah. So a little bit of challenge for you guys. So we got this question on the screen and I want each of you to give one thing. So what 3 things would you say are the most important ingredients to effective teaching and learning? And you cannot repeat the previous person. So don't say, oh, I agree with them. That's no, we got to come up with something different. So let's see here. We'll start with Dr. Langley first. I'll let her go first.
I wanted you to start with Dr. Gordon. What are the most important ingredients to effective teaching and learning?
One thing.
Okay. Knowing your kids.
All right. So building those relationships with the students, understanding. Okay. So knowing your kids, that's one. Who wants to jump in the next one?
So kids love structure. So routines and procedures or policy and procedures need to be established. So that supports learning. So if you don't have that in place, you will not be able to get to the instruction. So that's one of those conditions for learning foundation.
Do you think that's important regardless of the grade level?
Yes. Kids are kids. I'm in a middle school, so I expect kids to come in and try it. That's what they do. And so you just have to have routines and procedures in place to guide them doing what they need to do every day.
All right. So we got 2 good answers here. Dr. Gordon, what's the third one?
They stole mine.
I was going to say that. You know how many times I heard that in middle school? Oh, my Lord.
Okay. So to follow up with my fabulous colleagues there, we have a saying here that if you don't set the conditions for learning, then standards-based instruction cannot take place. So since they already talked about conditions for learning and their responses, then I'm going to say that final piece of teaching and learning goes to truly understanding and growing in your practice of delivering standards-based instruction, knowing the skills that those kids need to be able to master, knowing what mastery looks like, what proficiency looks like. So standards, so knowing your kids, having routines and structures in place to set the conditions for learning, and then lastly, delivering strong standards-based instruction in that environment.
Awesome. You guys watching this video, you're getting some great insight to crush your interview. Awesome stuff here. So,
Dr. Jason.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and they can use that strategy that Dr. Langley used to answer that question just now when you need more think time.
See how you do?
If the questions are printed in front of you, then you read it again. If not, you ask them, can you repeat that question, please?
There you go. Where can raise your hand and go, I'll go first. Hold on. Can you repeat that one?
So after they repeat it, then you say it back. You flip the question into your sentence, and that gives you more think time. Good job.
There you go. Nice. So technology is obviously a big part of learning. How would you incorporate technology into your instruction? So this is probably definitely a popular question, I would think, regardless of grade level. So how should teachers attack this?
So they need to, because we're in the 21st century and we're having our kids become 21st century ready. And if they're in Florida and they're in a traditional education program, then they've learned about CAPE, and somewhere in their education program that's part of our Florida requirements and the statutes. Just come ready to talk about how you use technology in the instruction. Even if we don't ask it, use it, especially because we're all going digital or using digital tools. Just go ahead and include it in there, because it's going to be something that's going to be important anyway, because we're not just totally paper and pencil anymore. In Florida, some of the assessments they take, they're not going to be able to use paper and pencil. So you have to be able to train the kids on the technology. So come ready just to talk about technology and have a few things in your back pocket. Even like Dr. Gordon said, if it's Kahoot, if it is Flickrs, whichever one, just come ready to talk about it, so that way people know you know how to use the technology.
There's technology you can use to deliver the lesson. Like we're using technology right now to deliver this information, right? Mm-hmm. However, so that's one way to use technology, but that technology does not further or takes the student learning deeper. So there's certain technology that we use to deepen the student learning of the materials. So if you say, I use a computer and a laptop and a document camera for my lessons, great. That's like saying I use the desk and the pencil and the computer monitor. Right. Those things help you facilitate the lesson. We want to hear how you use technology to drive in the content to allow the children opportunities to practice and process the skills from the lesson that you're delivering. So using technology to deliver the lesson versus using technology to allow the children to practice and process are two different ways to differentiate when you're answering this type of question.
Awesome.
Right. And I agree with both of those. One thing I do want to add is a lot of times the response that I get to this question is talking about, well, I know Microsoft Office, or I've used iReady, or I've used, and then we start just program dropping, like name dropping, drop this program. But it's not telling us how that program is actually, just as Dr. Gordon said, how it is essential to the learning process.
Mm-hmm. So we had some buzzwords before. So we covered social emotional learning. We covered differentiating instruction multiple ways. Here's another one. Describe what culturally responsive teaching and learning looks like in a classroom. So this is definitely, I would assume, a very popular question across the whole country, regardless of where you live. So first off, we need to define what culturally responsive teaching is, because sometimes people aren't 100% sure of what that means. So how would you guys define that for our viewers?
Dr. Hardrick has a great definition for that.
Really? Okay. So when this question came up, that took me back to Rita Pearson, the late Rita Pearson. One of the things she says is every child needs a champion, and then kids don't learn from people that they don't like. And so you have to merge those two things together. And that's really what happens when you are culturally responsive. You're finding out what that child needs. You're being an advocate for what that child needs and making sure that they get that. And understanding that education is equity, not equality, because what one child needs, another may not. And so you may need to pour a little bit more into one that you don't have to pour into another. That doesn't mean you neglected the other one. The other one just didn't need that. So being culturally responsive and knowing that part, being that advocate, that champion. And another part, understanding kids sometimes just need a listening ear. They just need someone that they know loves them. So that lets them get closer to you and build those relationships, and so that they can learn from a person that they like. It doesn't mean you never tell them no, but they have to be able to like you to some extent so that they can build that relationship and learn from you. So mixing that advocate champion piece with that likeness piece so that you can actually give that child what they need based on who they are, where they're trying to go, and where they come from, what they're going through. So.
Beautifully stated.
What did you say, Dr. Langley? Sorry.
I said beautifully stated. Very well put. And one of the things I want to go on the end of what it is not. Although it does encompass having diverse materials in your classroom, it is not just having books, multicultural books in the classroom on your shelves. Okay, so it's everything that has been forestated, but not. So don't come with this question. Well, I'll have multicultural text in the room. I'll put up multicultural posters in the room. All of those things are wonderful. But if you're not getting to know the child, because one thing I say often is culture is not race. You have to understand that. And a lot of times people try to deal with people of the same race in the same manner. Goes back to what you were saying earlier about equity versus equality. If I don't get to know the child and get to know what their culture is, then I cannot respond to it in a manner that will actually get them to want to learn from me. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful with that. So it's not just stuff or materials in the classroom. It's everything that was stated earlier.
I think my colleagues said that beautifully. I love how you said, let me explain to you what it is not, because we often don't frame it that way. I think taking everything that you said and allowing opportunities for the children to see themselves in your lessons, perhaps some of the examples or the questions. I am 98% minority, but it's not African American. There's a lot of Caribbean and Haitian Creole families here at my school. Haitian Creole families are different from African American families in some of their cultural traditions and some of their cultural norms. And so we have to respect that. And so we have to allow ways for children to see themselves in the lessons, to connect to those lessons. It's not just about, like Tammy's saying, you got a books of all races, on the shelf. And it's not just making sure that, we can say that. I'm gonna stop there. However, making sure the children can see themselves and connect to those lessons is important, and you got to know who they are in order to do that. I've got some kids who love to skateboard, and you may not think traditionally that's what their culture does, a lot of skateboarding, but that's what they do. So we need to incorporate some of those activities or those texts that may incorporate some of those things that they love, so that the kids can connect to that. So that's a huge topic, but I think they did justice to the answer.
That's a session all by itself.
It is.
But no one said that in one of the 3 keys of being a essential teacher there, an effective teacher.
That's a part of relationship.
Knowing your kids, that's what Tammy said.
Mm-hmm, there you go. So let's turn it around a little bit. This is a good question you guys gave me to throw on the screen. What questions do you have for us? Meaning either an administrator could sit across the table and ask you, the candidate, but I would think more likely a teacher coming into an interview should have that in their back pocket and come in ready to ask some questions. What do you guys think? Have you had candidates come into your interview and you don't ask this? They turn around and go, they ask you straight out questions.
So actually, that's the question I close all my interviews on, because I tell my the candidates when they come, we're going to hear about you. We're going to ask you some questions. And I say, in the end, you can ask us questions. It's your turn to interview us, because we want to make sure this is a match. And so the only way we'll know that is we let both sides talk. So I always encourage them to have questions. And if they didn't bring any, I give them a moment to write down any based on the interview process and what came up in discussion and interview. But I always encourage candidates to go with what you want to know. If they answer them in the interview, fine, don't ask them. But if they don't, ask your questions, because you want to make sure that's where you want to be, because people work best when they're happy, and you should be happy when you're in your workplace. And I tell people every day that I go to work to play. I don't go to work. And they all laugh at me. But the point is, if I want to work, like you said before we got into this discussion tonight, is you don't get into education for the money. So you should be in your happy spot. And so if you're not in your happy spot and you're not making the money you want to make, then you need to go be in your happy spot. So those questions let you know if that environment is the environment for you.
Well, let's drill down a little bit. What is, if I'm sitting there go, well, what question should I ask? What are some good questions you should tell these candidates to ask an administrator in an interview?
I have had teachers to tell me who come in very reflective and say, based upon this previous experience or based upon my program that I just finished, I'm really interested in this. Are there opportunities for me to grow in this? Whatever this is, fill in the blank. I've had teachers to ask me, will they have a mentor? Will they have coaching support? I've had teachers to say that, I'm coming in. Sometimes I'll ask them, okay, so this is a symbiotic relationship. You're coming to add something to the table. We're coming and we want to also add something back to you. So that way we're all growing. So at the end of, stop laughing at me. So at the end of the day, where do you see yourself in the next 3 years? By the end of this year, you want to accomplish what? And then by 3 years from now, you want to accomplish what? So I expect them to ask questions that lead us to those types of responses, because I want to hear that you're growing. So some of the questions that you should ask us are those questions that lead back to your professional growth and and what you want to do. I see there's a question in the chat, Dr.
Yeah, Shani, I was going to let you finish. I didn't want to stop your
no problem.
train of thought.
So do not ask me how much the job pays. Don't do that.
People ask that, really?
Yes. How much does it pay? And as principals, depending on your district, we don't handle your pay. Downtown HR handles the pay based upon previous experience and stuff like that. So in the interview, we can't tell you how much the job pays. And if the question, your first follow-up question is, how much does this pay? And at what point will my insurance kick in? Because I've heard that too. That tells us that may be your motivator versus some other things. So questions to ask us should always, to me, focus on your professional growth and what we can do to help you get there in whatever time frame you choose.
A great question that I've been asked that I feel is a great question is, what are your expectations of your teachers? And I think, for a candidate to ask me that, in my opinion, they're really trying to fill me out as a leader. And hopefully they're trying to see, am I a leader that like you said earlier, am I a leader that they would want to work with? Because that relationship is so important, as it's been stated here before. But I agree. What time do teachers normally leave the school? Stuff like that. And you'd be surprised some of the questions that are asked. How much do I get
teach the last class? If I got a planning last period, can I leave early?
Yes. Or sometimes asked. And
do I get flex time if I stay late?
Yes.
So Shanice, one of our viewers here, Shanice has got a great question. Do you think someone who is shy can be a teacher because she struggles with shyness?
Yes, and that's one of those questions about school culture. Like a great question people ask is, tell me about your school culture. So, and there are some school cultures that are quiet. They have this serene utopia type of feeling. You got some school cultures that are very excitable and loud. So when people ask us in our interviews, and I always do panel interviews, I don't typically interview by myself because I want people to see representatives from the team. And when they ask the question, what is your school culture like, or tell me about your school culture, that lets us talk about our house system. And of course, the moment we say something about house system, someone without fail on the panel will yell out their house call, because we have 3 houses, Panther House, Priest House, and Border House at our school. And of course, that sets off all the friendly controversy right in the middle of the interview, because one house cannot be represented in the interview and another not. So it lets you get a feel for the school. There is a spot for you as a shy person, because you don't have to change who you are. That's why you're encouraged to ask those questions about the school, so you can make sure you find the one that fits in for you.
Yeah, you'll be very surprised if you think I'll be honest with you. I was very shy when I was in a different track. I didn't start teaching until after my master's program, but all the way through my program, it was kind of halfway through where I was very shy, even asking questions in class, period, even growing up. But you start practicing, you start doing things, you get more comfortable. And then some people just tell me to shut up now because I talk too much. So,
and the person that asked the question about being shy, you'll be surprised. Some of our quietest teachers are our strongest teachers. They have a quiet control over the kids. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to explain it, but they are the meek, the mild, the quiet, and you walk in the room and the Johnny boy that's the jock that makes all the noise and does everything in everybody else's class. For some reason in that class, he's quiet, he doesn't need to do, and there's just this quiet control.
Awesome. Well, I've got two questions to wrap this up. So we got about 5 minutes to go. So the first one is, this is a general question, not specifically tied to interviewing. So you don't have to answer in the interview aspect. What is the greatest challenge facing teachers today? What do you guys think as an educator?
And that, if you asked me that question pre-COVID, I would have had a different answer. But you asked me that question in the middle of COVID, and we really don't know when COVID is going to go away or when the protocols that we have in place for COVID are going to go away. So for right now, today, the biggest challenge for teachers is conquering the blended and face-to-face instruction, because I have kids in the room, I have kids at home, and sometimes I have them at the same time. So coming up with new ways to engage kids for 7.5 hours in a school day or 7 hours in a day is what the new challenge is, because, and we understand many parents are afraid to send their kids back, and we get it, and we're not telling them they have to send them back. But then the challenge becomes that teachers have to figure out how I keep those kids engaged for 45 minutes, because they only get a 5-minute break and they're going to the next 45 minutes. And so eventually that wears on the child. So how do I keep them engaged? How do I monitor the kids in the classroom? How do I attend to both? How do I create lessons that can facilitate in classroom and at home at the same time? So the whole Corona pandemic has created a new set of challenges. We will conquer them, we're conquering them together, but it does present challenges, especially for teachers who have worked tech savvy pre-COVID, who had to jump into the fire during COVID to become tech savvy. So I think that's kind of hard to ask someone to change their whole instructional practice, that especially if I've been in it for 20 years or 30 years or 25 years, to have to change on the spot.
All right.
I would say protecting your personal why and passion from naysayers and negativity about what's going on with the profession and the challenges of the profession. It is very difficult sometimes to tune out all of the things that are making our jobs difficult. And so a challenge is, I would say, challenge yourself to find those things that are possible to do during this impossible school year. So that would be a challenge for you. That's that growth mindset. That's that internal just fortitude to keep your personal passion and why going.
So that goes on that ACT word you used before. He said symbiotic.
Oh boy. Dr. Langley, what do you think?
I would say the mandate for everyone to be flexible. And I know in education, we always had to be flexible, but I think in COVID times, I mean, it was already stated, flexibility because of the so many unknowns as it relates to COVID-19 and as it relates to how we're educating kids. I think it's really impacting profession now.
All right, here we go. Last question, and you have to answer this in one sentence.
Oh my!
Right? One sentence. Here we go.
One sentence, Dr. Gordon.
One. Wow, you did this. Wow.
Yes, Dr. Hardrick. I need you to abide by the one sentence rule, DJ.
I thought I was bad. All right. What's one piece of advice you would give a teacher as he or she goes into an interview in one sentence?
Be confident.
All right. 2 words. That's even better. There you go.
Did that qualify?
Let's call our grammar police. Let me see if that's technically a sentence.
Know thine own self.
Ah, very nice.
Listen to the questions the interviewers are asking so that way you know what they expect.
Very good. Sounds like you've had experience with people not answering the question. Am I safe to assume that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, I want to thank you guys tremendously for helping out and giving your time during the stressful time, definitely during the school week, after work. Dr. Gordon's still at school. I can see her office in the background. So she's really dedicated to the field. So I want to thank you for giving your time. Matt, we'll pop you out of the room and just hang out for a minute. We'll catch up before you guys take off. So once again, thank you for joining us for another session. Whether you're watching live or watching the recording, make sure you click that like button on the video, subscribe to the Learning Liaisons, and share this video with your friends because the recording is going to be on our channel. And we did a similar one with different principals in our previous episode last week. So once again, thank you for dedicating your time. If you have any topic that you find is imperative for new teachers or aspiring school teachers coming out of the College of Education, you think is a very tangible and good topic that we should talk about and bring some experts on, drop a comment below this video. Shoot us an email at thelearningliaisons.com. We have a contact button, or drop a comment below this video or on our social media page. We're here for you. So with that being said, I want you guys to have a great rest of your evening, an even better week, and a rock star weekend. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Deets with Dr. A. Have a great night. We'll talk to you next time.